Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the EpiMed conference call. I'm pleased to present Wouter Spek. For the first part of this call, let me remind you that all participants will remain in listen-only mode, and there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Mr. Spek, please begin.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Sorry for the mix-up, but we had some problems with our online system. Today we're going to talk about personalized medicine in Europe, and especially what the role of the funders is in Europe and how to deal with that. Let me briefly go with you over the agenda. First of all, I will tell something about myself and explain a little bit what Eurobioform is about. Secondly, as an introduction, I want to briefly fly with you over Europe and see what we are seeing right now, and then more specifically go into the role of the funders in Europe, especially the public funders, I would say, what kind of incentive we need and how can we achieve convergence, and some of the conclusions. But before I say that, of course, personalized medicine is one of the hot topics in Europe, not only in Europe, but I think also in other continents. And it's clear that Europe is in a good position, but that we're still a long way what I would call personalized medicine or even personalized care. So let me briefly tell you a little bit what I have been doing up till now and some of my background. I have a master's degree from Leiden University, and I did my PhD studies at Leiden University and the University of California, San Diego. So I'm a biologist, and as you know, a biologist thinks in systems, and I think this is also important for what we're going to discuss today. Immediately after my PhD thesis, I worked for several government-related agencies in the Netherlands for the last 20 years in all kinds of activities. We started out in biotechnology in the 80s, then it became genomics, now it's life sciences, and then it became personalized medicine. So it gives you something of an evolutionary scale of the activities I have been involved in. During my time at several of the agencies I already discussed, I have been frequently involved in all kinds of activities, in framework programs. I think I started with framework program 5. We are now in framework program 8, as you know, Horizon 2020. But also I used to be an advisor for the program COST, the Eureka program, did some work on high-tech connections with the USA, and some bilaterals between the Netherlands and France. And in that capacity, I also was an advisor to the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs in terms of international collaboration between the Netherlands and other countries. After that, I was also one of the founding fathers of the Netherlands Genomics Initiative, which is a public-private partnership. We started out with 300 million Dutch euros at that time, working towards public-private partnerships in genomics in the Netherlands. One of the other things I did was to set up one of the first aeronets in plant genomics. I'm not fully aware whether you all know what aeronets are, but we will discuss it a little bit later. But an aeronet is a collaboration between funders in Europe in certain areas. After that, I started my own company. In the year 2008, creating public-private partnerships in the life sciences. We are also advising several university medical centers in the Netherlands. And what we do is we focus on positioning, networking, and finance for our clients. Again, the areas of interest we are interested in is life sciences, health research, healthcare, medical technologies, and ICT-related activities. Let me tell you a little bit about Eurobioform, because that's the reason why we are all here. Eurobioform is a project financed by the European Commission, and its main objective is to create a forum for research funders and performers in personalized medicine in Europe. Why performers and funders? Because that's important. There's a lot of policy developments currently in Europe. There's a lot of new instruments currently in Europe, and it's interesting to observe what everybody is doing in terms of stimulating of personalized medicine research, from, I would say, basic research, which is on the far end of the equation, towards the market on the other side. We focus specifically on the role of, I would say, the policymakers and the funders. So we don't focus on the science of personalized medicine. We do not focus so much on what the industry is doing. We are more interested what are the money streams, especially the public funding streams, doing in Europe with respect to personalized medicine. And of course we realize that we leave out a number of stakeholders, the patients, the healthcare professionals, I mentioned the industry, science, by only focusing on government and finance. But there's a reason for that, because there are so many activities already out there in Europe. And my host, APMed, is perfectly aligned to work with the industry. So we do not want to copy what APMed is doing. We want to be complementary what we are doing. And that's the reason why we also team up with other organizations in Europe. The same goes for patients. There are a lot of patients organizations out there. And again, we don't feel that competent to work with that, but with patients ourselves, but we do work with those patients' organizations. So that's what Eurobioforum is not. What we are is, I would say, we have 3 activities, which we call Scout, Connect, and Activate. And Scout, the first thing is information. So basically, what's going on in Europe. Now, this may sound like a trivial question, but it's not so easy to answer. I mentioned already that we are financed by the European Commission, and when I asked the director of the Health Directorate, when are we successful for you, the answer was, when we know what is going on. And of course that's a big challenge. So one of the issues of or part of this scouting project we have is our observatory. You probably have seen it online, and otherwise you can see it online, where we collect information, what is going on in countries, what is going on in regions, or what is even going on in certain cities in Europe with respect to personalized medicine. Following our observatory, we also organize annual conferences, because we believe still in, even in this modern day of age, in person-to-person contact, and to work with the leaders in Europe to figure out what is the next steps we are going to take. So again, this community development, what we mentioned here on the slide, is very important. Later on I will tell you a little bit about that it is not only the personalized medicine community as it is right now, because we feel that there are other communities which should also be involved, but we can discuss this later. The other thing is that we, of course, following our information flow, what we call Scout, we also process the information and look for maybe low-hanging fruit of activities which should be done in Europe. So we organize satellite meetings for special interest groups, and topics we already identified are education and training, and in this respect we work together with APMed to figure out what needs to be done there in a European scale. And I can tell you that's not easy, because if you talk about education and training, who are you educating and what are you educating? But it's something we think is very important, especially the young doctors of the future. We also work together with the regions. I mentioned that to you. They are local ecosystems, and we see them as pilots to work together. Another special interest which is rising and is coming from one of our strategic advisory board members, Rudy Balling, he says there's an impact of social media on personalized medicine. We need to look into that as well. And as you know, Leroy Hood already mentioned this under the heading of participatory medicine. And the final thing we are looking in is what the hell is wrong with biomarkers in Europe. And we can discuss this later on as well. So this is ABF. So we are there to help other organizations to formulate actions and activities. We are not so much there, and I want to stress that, to write reports. We are more those people who want to do activities in terms of actions. So that's a little bit about ABF. Now, Europe. I can't see where you're coming from, but I assume there are people from Europe, maybe also from other continents, but Europe, that's an interesting topic, I would say. going on? A lot of projects, a lot of activities. I already mentioned it's very difficult to figure out what is really going on, and there are also a number of hurdles there which we have to look at. Let me show you a couple of, I would say, statements or quotes what I want to discuss with you. Fragmentation. This is a word used in Europe, most of the time very negatively, but you could also look at it a little bit more positively and say there's a lot of diversity in Europe, especially for personalized medicine. There's a lot of diversity. Institutional barriers. We are not the United States of America. We are not China. We are Europe, and we have 27 legislations, although we also have a European legislation. This doesn't make things very easy, I must say. And we all know about the problems some of our small and medium-sized companies have to deal with. Convergence, that's not so much what we talk about. We talk about a lot of different projects, we talk a lot about a lot of funding, but convergence is not, I would say, one of our focal points. Enormous high level of public investments. We do have that. We spend billions on research. But the question is, what is the return on investment, of course? I already mentioned to you the weak communication information systems in Europe. That's a problem. And my question is, are we enough looking to the future? So, not everything is bad in Europe, I must say, because I already mentioned this diversity. I just get a note that somebody can't hear anything. Is that true for all of you or not? I assume that that only one participant cannot hear anything, so I will just go on. Let me go over with you a little bit again about the statements I made here. For instance, the weak communication information system. I already mentioned to you that I started off in the biotech world. We were, at that time, we thought that genetic modification was perfect. We were very clever in academia and companies. But when we were finished with what we were doing and we gave it to the public, there was not much consent what was going on. So we financed a lot of research, but we didn't spend a lot of time on explaining to everybody what was going on. And this is now that we have the GMO directive in Europe, which is still hampering innovation. Maybe another example of that. We talk about personalized medicine, and I'm sure that we're going to discuss this later, but some people talk about stratified medicine. Other people talk about individualized medicine. Other people talk about systems medicine. We also have precision medicine, and we also have personalized care. That doesn't help either, and also the funders have to be aware of the fact that if they write programs and give them a title, that it is clear that we talk about the same elements. So, again, it's a lot of things going on in Europe, but also some of the problems we have. One of the problems we have, for instance, is, and I will mention it right now, the rapid turnover of public stimulation programs. What I mean with that, if you go to the United States, I'm not sure whether I'm correct, but in 1945 or 1957, in the US, the SBER program was launched, the Small Business Innovation Research Program. Till today, it's running in all kinds of capacities. For the American situation, that's very clear because you know what the program looks like, you know what it is doing, you know how much money you can get, you know how to write a proposal. Let's have a look at Europe. We are, every 3 or 4 years, we are reinventing all kinds of implementation schemes, which doesn't help. We had in a couple of years ago, we had the Network of Excellence, and then suddenly they are discarded again because somebody thought, well, they don't work. And actually they did work. So that is not helping either. So that's something I think which is important for the future as well. So, concluding, if we talk about Europe, and let's take Europe 2020, which is the same to Horizon 2020, we need an integral chain approach, coordinated actions, and all stakeholders. I think this is very important, otherwise Europe is not going to deliver on the promise of personalized medicine, and which we all want. Now, having said that, let's have a closer look at the funders. Now, here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 examples, but I don't want to go into competition with you, but if we all would list the number of programs which are out there, you probably are somewhere between, estimate, 400 to 600 programs which stimulate R&D in Europe. Not all of them personalized medicine, so that's also important. Important that you know how to deal with that, but let's have a closer look to that. So we have the public funders, so we have countries. What do you have in a country? If you look at the Netherlands, we have a research council financing basic research, we have technology agencies funding industrial research, we have regional development agencies, and we have some other funding streams. So that's already quite complicated if you look to one country. Then we have Europe and the European Commission, of course, which, of course, the heavy hitter, the framework programs, and in Framework 7 we had also the SIP program and some other programs, heavy hitters in terms of what's going on. And what is interesting to observe, that there is a debate going on for the last 40 years between the European Commission and the individual countries. Who is in charge? European Commission states we only pay 10% of the R&D R&D budget in Europe, and the countries pay the other 90%. So there's a little bit of a debate going on who is telling the shots. But that's not all. Of course, we also have private funders, and I include industry a little bit in that, although not in the capacity as a funder, but they are very important to steer research and development. But also the banks, the venture capital, if you talk about small companies, but also, for instance, the charities and foundations, which is maybe not so much elaborated in Europe as in the States, but they are becoming more and more important. Another new financing stream is, of course, crowdfunding and prize competitions. So you might say, what's the problem? Because there seems to be a lot of money out there. But if you have a closer look on that, it's all very specific. It's dealing with a very small part of the, I would say, the integral chain, again, from basic research to entering the market. And it's not all that clear how to use it. For instance, you're all aware of also the European Investment Bank. A couple of years ago, there was a communication that also the European Investment Bank would spend more of its money for, I would say, research, or more particular research infrastructure, which was called the risk-sharing financing facility. I don't know if you know that, but it was a loan, and you can get money from the bank to build, for instance, a research infrastructure you need. The only problem is that, for instance, academia is not that much accustomed to using loans. So there was a problem. We had an instrument, but the fit and match between the objective and what we could do with it was not that good. So another lesson learned that this is very important. I already talked to you about the turnover of the instruments and also the number of programs which are out there. So there seems to be an abundance of programs, and again, not only for academia but also for companies. You have the Eureka scheme in Europe, more dedicated to big companies. We have the Eurostar scheme, more dedicated to small companies. So this is all there and in place. So again, I said to you, what's the problem? Maybe there is not a problem. Now, let's have a look at what then is going on. What's happening with that money? Now, this is interesting, how to align 1,000 projects to improve return on investment and deliver better healthcare for all, because after all, we are investing a lot. What are we going to do with it? And I can give you one example before we go on. we did a quick scan of biomarker research in Europe, where we looked at, okay, what is the European Commission financing now in real life in biomarker research? Now, there's a lot of projects, as you can imagine. It's about €1 billion. So currently, we have €1 billion more of biomarker research in Europe. But are they all standalone? Are they collaborating to each other? Are we trying to solve bottlenecks? That's an important question. So, this is just an overview of Europe and of some of the projects which are running right now. Now, I'm not going into debate with you whether I missed something, but what you see here are ERANETs. So these are programs where funders work together to finance cross-border research. We have all kinds of big projects like Joint Program Initiative and IMI. You probably all know the Innovative Medicine Initiative. We have ourselves. We have research infrastructures and in all kinds of areas, biobanking, bioinformatics, translational research, clinical trials. We have international projects, and where I must stress that the European Commission has played a very important role to create global projects and programs in cancer, epigenomics, metagenomics, human gene, microbiome. I already mentioned COST and Eureka, and for the sake of argument, because we couldn't read what I'm telling you, there are a lot of Eureka projects also in the area, especially in diagnostics and personalized medicine. And in addition to that, of course, we have the national finance project. So this is more or less gives you an idea where we're working on. And one of the things I left out of my slide is, for instance, the European Research Council, because we are also financing individuals, future leaders, also in personalized medicine, also in individual basis. So this is nice, this is good that it is there. The question is there some form of collaboration between all those layers? But there's even a more question. I already mentioned that to you. It's not only health-related disciplines we need. And if we go to the next slide, I think that ICT is very much important for personalized medicine. I would even say that it is the Achilles heel of personalized medicine. In other words, everybody's talking about big data. I would rather talk about cheap data. And what we observe that also on the ICT level, the European Commission is financing all kinds of projects and programs which are dedicated to high-performance computing, cloud computing, infrastructure, etc., etc. Data infrastructure is important. So what if we would connect those together and see what's happening there? Because behind this is public money, but there's also private money involved, in the case of IMI, as you know, or Colipi, which is a similar program. So what are we doing? Why is this not in some way aligned with each other? Wouldn't we get more out of this? That's, I think, the main question, because it seems that the money is there. We already discussed that. There are so many implementation schemes. You have to be a kind of a wizard to figure out which one is for what period. It's there. We have the projects running, but I think that convergence is now very important, because there's the diversity we already discussed, but the unity could be in combining those resources. Now, what is then that we need? Because it seems that we're not missing anything, because we have the money, we have the project, but what is needed to bring things together? I think this is very important. I already mentioned this fit and match. Sometimes we have financial incentives which do not reach their own objective because they are so cleverly thought of that they don't work. And that's important. And of course we have to realize that capacity building, even in Europe, is important. We also have to realize that knowledge generation, basic research, is important. But there are also other elements there. How about industry? What is the public funding will do for industry? That's also important. And I think what is important in the end is, you're probably aware of that terminology, is financial engineering. How can we make the best of that? Now, of course, Horizon 2020 is lurking in the back. The first calls will be launched in early 2014. So again, a big framework program with very big ambitions. The ambitions reaching from societal challenges, I think health is one. Public-private partnerships. I think we already have seen that in the health research and the health development and healthcare arena, this has already been done, but also the scientific excellence. So, in that respect, I think this is a continuation of Frameworks Program 7, and maybe a lot of people will think it's completely different. I do not agree with that. It's more or less in the same ballgame. What is also important is that there is a tendency already now in Europe that we need big projects. I do not agree with that. I think that also small projects are very important because after all, a multinational is also not built in one day. And what we observe is that some of those big projects are totally not aligned to other projects in Europe. I can give you an example. Half a year ago, I was at a conference on aging. There's a big activity in aging, as you know, in Europe, and we put a lot of money there. And one of the presenters said, we need clinical trials for elderly people. Now, in fact, I know that is true because elderly people are different from young people. They have a different metabolism, and so forth, and so forth. So I asked them the question, do you work together with ECRIN? Now, first of all, I had to explain what ECRIN is, and ECRIN is, as you know, one of the research infrastructures dedicated to clinical trials in Europe. But they had no clue. So what we see there is that we have a big program which in some way or another is not perfectly aligned with other activities in Europe. And I think this is important. So the other side is what I say, small is also beautiful. Sometimes small projects can achieve much more, much faster, easier to manage, to work for, and you get a better return on the investment. Now, so what we need, in fact, is we all know what we talk about personalized medicine, the right medicine to the right patient at the right time. I think we need the right instrument for the right objective to deliver the right results. And although we have good stimulation schemes going on, I think we need to do better. So, what does it mean? Because I can complain about funders, what I want, but I also want to complain a little bit about academia and companies, etc., because I think the instruments are there, but we need a financial strategy if we want to reach out for something and not only look for the short-time cash return on getting a grant or a loan or whatever it is and to work from there. So that's a little bit missing, I think, also in Europe, where you say, okay, what is your strategy? What do you want to achieve in the next 10 years? What do I need? Who are my partners? What kind of financial schemes do I need? If you create startup companies from a basic research project, in the end you need somewhere venture capital. So you need to be aware that these are different people than a public funder. Maybe they have the same objectives in the end, but they are different people. So I think financial strategy is important. And then from financial strategy, you go to financial engineering. There's no law in Europe, which I'm aware of, that you cannot use all kinds of financial schemes together to reach your goal. But I don't see that a lot of people are using that approach to finance their project or their activities in the end. It's always somewhere in the middle there's a problem, a financial problem, and then suddenly all hell breaks loose. That doesn't work. So I think that you need to work with the funders, but you also need to have your strategy yourself. Now, let me try to wrap this up a little bit and before we go into discussions. I think, although we are in an economic crisis, I still think that the money is out there in Europe. So I do not believe that it is not there. I know it's very difficult to get, but it is there. We just have to work very hard to get the right fund in the right phase on the right time. So I think it's possible. Secondly, What I miss a little bit is funding for convergence. I already mentioned to you, you have a lot of activities going on, but if you want to combine things, you have to have an incentive for that. So I would like to see incentive for convergent projects where projects work together or companies are going to work together which run projects to get the most of it. Because in the end, personalized medicine, and we haven't discussed the depth and width of personalized medicine, but it's too big for all of us. It's too big for all of us. So I think that working together and collaboration is important. Now, the small is beautiful. I already told you. I think it's important. You have to realize that maybe not the last example I want to give you before we go into the discussion. If a big tanker goes to the Rotterdam harbor and it's sailing through the canal, it's going to steer towards Rotterdam harbor at Le Havre in France. And the reason for this is because it's such a big ship that it cannot steer at the last moment. In the end, if it doesn't succeed, there are small towing boats who will turn the ship when needed. So that's the reason why I think if personalized medicine is a big tanker, if personalized care is a big tanker, we need small projects which can act as a towing boat. And finally, I already mentioned this, I think it's the Achilles heel of Europe, if I compare it with the States. Information exchange is key. It's still difficult to exchange information, to work with information, to share information to get better for all of us. So this is really something we need to work on, and this is also really something where the funders can play an important role. So basically, these were the take-home messages, and I already told you that we organize conferences to discuss with policymakers and funders what is going on in Europe and to set up activities. So you're all invited to our next conference, which will take place on the 27th and 28th of May in Munich in Germany. And for the program, I would suggest that you look at our website and take it from there. So this was my presentation, and I think it's now time for the live discussion, but the moderator will help you with that.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone keypad, and you will enter a queue. When you are announced, then ask your question. So once again, please press 01 on your telephone keypad. Okay, Mr. Speck, we have a question from the line of Tomris Cezaroglu from Maastricht University. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. When you say personalized care, do you mean personalized health care, or personalized care is again a new name that appears in the scene?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Sorry to confuse you, but that's one of our problems we see. There's so many people using different terminologies, and again, I think we talk about healthcare. So, but I'm not that I would say convinced that personalized medicine is also a good terminology, because it seems that it's only about medicine, and I think we're talking about something is bigger.
Yes, I totally agree with you that it's something bigger. And I have another question. May I ask?
Sure.
You touched the issue of having 27 different legislation, and on top of that, the EU legislation. But it's not only the legislation, but also the healthcare systems as a whole are quite diverse in Europe, as diverse as in the whole world almost. So can it be also another type of barrier?
I think, you're absolutely right. I think it's important to realize that there are differences in Europe. that we just have to work with that. But I think what is important, and I think that's also a little bit in your question, is the fact that we can talk about research, basic research in personalized medicine, right? That's one.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's bringing the results to the clinic or in the clinic, have the doctors use it, have the patient benefit from it, have the insurance companies reimburse the treatments, etc., etc. So I think it's very important that also we look at the end of this chain and see who are making the decisions over there. Because I think technology on itself, we all love next generation sequencing, we all want to bring it in the clinic, but if it isn't reimbursed or if the regulator doesn't allow it, then it will never happen.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, for the time being, there are no further questions. Just as a reminder, if you wish to ask a question, please dial 01 on your telephone keypad. Mr. Speck, no questions have come through as yet.
Okay. Well, perhaps then I wrap it up. I want to thank you all for participating in this webinar. And of course, if you want further information on what we are doing and what we are observing, please do not hesitate to contact us. And again, I would like to urge you, if you have an interest, that you can join us in our annual conference in Munich in May. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's conference call. Thank you all for attending.